A girl was once transported to another world where she became a legendary warrior and defeated the Demon King alongside her companions. After saving the kingdom, she returned to Earth and eventually settled into a peaceful life as a 45-year-old mother of two. However, years later, two of her old comrades suddenly arrive from the fantasy world to bring her back because the Demon King is about to return. But after seeing how much time changed her, they mistakenly believe her daughter is the legendary hero they came searching for. A long time ago, a Demon King descended upon a peaceful kingdom. The kingdom fought bravely with all of its strength, but before they realized it, the entire kingdom had fallen into the Demon King's hands. In the middle of the despair, a prophet stepped forward and revealed a prophecy that a girl with a golden eye would appear and save their world. Just like the prophecy foretold, a mysterious girl eventually appeared in the kingdom. After listening to the king's desperate request, the girl and her companions joined forces and fought against the Demon King with mythical power. In the end, peace was finally restored, and the girl with the golden eye safely returned to her own world. 2 years later, the king stared at the stone that sealed the Demon King and noticed cracks slowly forming across it. He realized that if the seal completely broke, the kingdom would once again fall into the Demon King's hands. Since he could not allow that to happen, he handed a pendant to two cloaked figures standing before a portal. The king explained that the pendant would guide them to the girl from the prophecy. With that, the two mysterious figures stepped into the portal and traveled to the past to bring back the fabled warrior. Meanwhile, in Korea, a high school girl was rushing around inside her family's convenience store while shouting at her mother for not waking her up earlier. Her mother quickly argued back, saying she had already tried several times. But the girl stayed up all night reading comics again. She complained that her daughter always slept late because of those comics and asked why she could not wake up properly like her brother. The girl casually brushed it off while getting ready to leave. Her mother tried to make her eat something before going to school, but the girl refused because she was already late and had cleaning duty that morning. After barely catching the bus, she finally relaxed and immediately started reading her comic. 20 minutes later, she finished the latest chapter and smiled happily while thinking it was the best chapter ever. Her favorite comic, Love Arrow from Another World, was a romantic fantasy story where the female main character traveled to another world and defeated a demon lord alongside a prince. Although they fought constantly at first, they slowly got closer throughout the story. The girl tried holding back her excitement in public while secretly wishing she could become the main character herself and escape into another world without school or exams. By the time classes ended, she was completely drained from studying all day. While pretending to study after school, she planned to secretly read the comic update instead. She told her friends she wanted to go to another world just like the comic's heroine, because real life was too boring. One of her friends then brought up a strange rumor spreading around the neighborhood. Apparently, two large people wearing hoods had been approaching girls, staring at their faces for a while, and then simply walking away. One friend insisted they were weird perverts with high standards, while another believed they were kidnappers searching for the daughter of a rich family. The girls kept arguing back and forth until the main girl finally got annoyed and told everyone to stop talking nonsense and go home already. Later that evening, she walked home alone through a dark and quiet street. Normally, the empty road already felt creepy, but after hearing the rumor earlier, she felt even more nervous. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound behind her made her jump in fear. She quickly turned around only to discover a garbage bag lying nearby with a cat standing behind it. Feeling relieved, she laughed at herself for being scared over nothing. However, while she was distracted, someone quietly appeared behind her. A hooded figure suddenly spoke, saying they had finally found her and needed her to come with them. Startled, the girl quickly stepped away and asked who they were. Before she could react further, another hooded person rushed over and tightly hugged her while excitedly saying they had finally found her after searching for so long. When the hood slipped off, the girl was shocked to see an elf standing right in front of her. The elf happily said it had been a long time and that she had not changed at all. The girl stared at them in total confusion while trying to process the situation. The other hooded figure then removed the hood as well, revealing a woman named Luca. Luca apologized for surprising her and explained that she wore the hood because people kept staring at her face. Seeing the two of them immediately reminded the girl of the rumor from school about hooded strangers approaching girls. Her thoughts instantly spiraled out of control as she convinced herself they were kidnappers after ransom money. Luca calmly suggested discussing everything somewhere else, but the girl only became more frightened after hearing that. While quietly mumbling for them to leave her alone, Luca leaned closer because she could not hear her properly. Without warning, the girl suddenly swung her heavy school bag directly into Luca's face and shouted at the creepy cosplayers to stay away from her. Luca staggered backward from the unexpected attack, while the elf stood there completely confused about whether to chase after the girl or check on Luca first. The girl immediately ran away at full speed while thinking about how dangerous the situation had just been. Back on the street, the elf asked Luca if she was all right. Luca quickly asked where Myeonggok had gone, and the elf suggested following after her. However, Luca admitted that something felt strange because the girl did not seem to remember them at all. While running home, the girl noticed that nobody seemed to be following her anymore and felt slightly relieved. She told herself that once she passed the nearby alley, she would safely reach home. Finally, she spotted her family's convenience store and relaxed for a moment, only for Elf to suddenly appear right in front of her again. Shocked by how quickly Elf caught up, the girl almost wondered if Elf could fly. The elf tried calming her down by saying they only wanted to talk, but the girl refused to listen. Luca then grabbed her wrist and seriously asked whether she truly did not remember her. Luca introduced herself and insisted it was really her, but the girl angrily replied that she did not care who Luca was and demanded to be let go. At that moment, the girl noticed her mother stepping outside the convenience store. Before she could call out for help, Luca quickly covered her mouth and apologized, saying they could not afford to attract attention there any longer. Tears filled the girl's eyes as she desperately hoped her mother would notice her. Just then, her mother suddenly sensed something wrong and looked toward them. The moment she saw her daughter Manhwa crying, she immediately rushed forward holding a broom and attacked Luca without hesitation. The girl quickly ran into her mother's arms while crying in relief. Her mother stood protectively in front of her and warned the strangers not to lay a finger on her daughter. The elf quickly tried explaining that everything was just a misunderstanding, while Luca complained in disbelief about getting attacked with a broom. However, Luca suddenly froze after carefully watching the mother's movements. Her expression slowly changed as she stared directly into the woman's eyes. Those movements, those eyes. Could she actually be Myeonggok? Not the daughter who looked like her, but the mother herself. Back when the legendary warrior was still fighting in another world, the final battle against the Demon King had already pushed everyone to their limits. Luca charged forward once again with exhaustion written all over her face, trying to land another attack. But the Demon King instantly noticed her and stopped her attack midway like it was nothing. Forced to retreat, Luca returned to the group while breathing heavily. The elf quickly asked if she was all right, and Luca immediately asked about everyone else. The elf admitted that everyone was barely holding on and said even their own strength was reaching its limit. The Demon King casually destroyed everything in its path without slowing down at all. For the first time, Luca openly wondered if they could really defeat such a monster. Meanwhile, the young warrior with the golden eye slowly stood back up, hearing Luca's hopeless words. She firmly declared that they would only know the answer if they kept fighting. Luca immediately snapped back, asking if she had not understood anything she just said. Continuing to fight would only get all of them killed for nothing. But the young warrior refused to back down and said she did not come all the way to another world just to give up without a fight. Present day, the mother suddenly opened her eyes after dreaming about those old memories. She quietly stopped her alarm and sat there for a moment while thinking about how strange the dream felt. Most of those memories had already become blurry after all these years, yet inside the dream, everything felt perfectly clear again. As she slowly got out of bed, she wondered what to make for breakfast. Now, at 49 years old, Myeonggok lived a completely normal life. Outside her room, her son greeted her while getting ready early in the morning. She told him to hurry up and change while she prepared breakfast. The boy reminded her that he needed money for his special lectures by the end of the week, causing her to realize time had passed by quickly again. While opening the refrigerator, she quietly reflected on her daily routine. Every morning she woke up early, cleaned the shop, prepared breakfast for her children, and spent the rest of the day living an ordinary and peaceful life. Compared to her younger days, the difference felt unbelievable. Back then, every single day had felt like an adventure. She smiled softly and admitted that she truly enjoyed this plain and stable lifestyle now. She believed she was happiest living peacefully with her family. And as people grew older, exciting things naturally stopped happening. That was simply how life worked. At least, that was what she believed that morning, because later that same evening, her peaceful life completely shattered. Standing outside her convenience store, Myeonggok held a broom protectively in front of her daughter while staring at Luca and the elf. Earlier that morning, she had literally been thinking about how nothing exciting would happen anymore. Her daughter nervously shouted at them, demanding to know who they were and why they knew her mother's name. Both Luca and the elf froze in shock after hearing the word mother. That was when they finally realized the truth. The woman standing before them was actually Myeonggok herself. The elf looked overwhelmed with relief and excitement while telling Luca they had finally found her. After almost mistaking her daughter for her, they could finally be certain. The elf quickly explained that they came because they desperately needed her help. There was a serious problem with the seal holding back the Demon King. If nothing was done, calamity would once again fall upon the kingdom. Thankfully, the Demon Lord had not fully awakened yet, meaning the situation would not be as terrible as the last war, but they still needed Myeonggok's help to control the stone before it was too late. Hearing those words immediately made Myeonggok realize how serious the situation must truly be if they had traveled all the way there to find her. However, before she could even respond properly, her daughter grabbed her attention in confusion and asked what they were talking about. Only then did Myeonggok remember that Minha was standing right beside her. Her daughter nervously asked whether she actually knew these people and whether she was planning to go somewhere. The question caused Minha to remember something from her childhood about her mother leaving somewhere long ago. Myeonggok immediately denied everything and firmly assured her daughter that she was not going anywhere. Luca could not believe what she was hearing. She stared at Myeonggok in disbelief and argued that it was impossible for her to be the same person. Only 2 years had passed in their world, yet Myeonggok now looked far older than Luca remembered. There was no way someone could change that much in only 2 years, so Luca became convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. That comment instantly made Minha furious. She angrily threatened them again with the broom and warned them to leave before they got hit even harder. The elf desperately tried calming the situation down, but Minha was already too angry to listen. The elf then turned toward Myeonggok and quietly asked if she truly remembered them. Myeonggok carefully observed both Luca and the elf. Even though they spoke confidently, she realized they were still uncertain about her identity. That hesitation gave her an opportunity. So, she calmly lied. Pretending to be confused, Myeonggok claimed she had no idea who they were. She acted like a normal older woman and insisted they must have mistaken her for someone else entirely. Then she politely asked them to leave her family alone. The elf immediately panicked and stepped closer, insisting that if she looked properly at their face, she would definitely remember eventually. Before the conversation could continue, 2 police officers approached after receiving a report about a disturbance. Minha instantly pointed at Luca and the elf, while claiming they had tried to kidnap her. Both Luca and the elf were completely shocked by the accusation. Luca immediately tried explaining that everything was just a misunderstanding, but Minha kept arguing back loudly. The police officers eventually decided to handcuff Luca and bring her to the station to sort things out properly. While one officer escorted Luca away, the other stayed behind to comfort Minha and Myeonggok. After the police finally left, Minha sighed in relief and complained that she could not believe dangerous people like that actually existed. She nervously asked how they even knew her mother's name. However, instead of answering, Myeonggok immediately checked whether her daughter was hurt anywhere. Minha said she was completely fine, but her mother suddenly smacked her lightly and scolded her for not calling sooner when something dangerous happened. Minha defended herself by saying she never got the chance, and besides, her mother had already scared the strangers away with the broom anyway. Still dragging her daughter inside the store, Myeonggok quietly stared up at the moon. She never thought she would see those people again after all these years, but more importantly, she truly did not want that kind of adventure in her life anymore. As Minha called for her to come inside, Myeonggok slowly followed behind while still holding the broom in her hand. Then suddenly, without anyone noticing at first, the broom quietly began to glow. Elsewhere, the police officers escorting Luca and the elf suddenly found themselves in trouble. One of the officers was pushed aside. The female officer immediately shouted at them, demanding to know what they had just done and warning them not to move. Before the situation could escalate further, the elf calmly used magic to put both officers to sleep. The elf apologized quietly and said they would only be taking a short nap. Afterward, the elf turned toward Luca and asked if she was alright. Luca instantly exploded in anger and shouted whether she looked alright at all. The elf, whose name was finally revealed to be Romatird, seemed confused by her reaction and reminded her that they had finally found Myeongok. Romatird thought she would at least feel relieved after searching for so long, but Luca immediately denied it and insisted they still needed to keep searching. Romatird was shocked by her answer. Luca firmly argued that there was no way someone could change that much in only 2 years. Even if the woman claimed to be someone else, Luca still could not believe that Myeongok could possibly look so different now. Romatird calmly pointed out that the woman's eyes were exactly the same as Myeongok's. Even if her appearance had changed, Romatird was certain it was really her. Trying to calm Luca down, Romatird suggested checking one more thing first because an idea had come to mind. Meanwhile, back at the convenience store, Myeongok sat there exhausted after barely sleeping the entire night. Her thoughts kept returning to the events from yesterday. Although she successfully talked her way out of the situation, she knew Luca and Romatird would not give up that easily. The fact that they had suddenly come searching for her after all these years made her deeply uneasy. But what troubled her most was something Luca said earlier. 2 years, not 31 years. Myeongok slowly realized that Luca and Romatird looked exactly the same as before. They had not aged at all. The realization was shocking, but at the same time, it made sense. Time clearly flowed differently between the two worlds. While she was lost in thought, several customers entered the convenience store. Behind them, Luca and Romatird quietly entered as well. Luca immediately asked whether Myeongok could really not see them, and Romatird confidently explained that she could not. Earlier, they should have simply used ghost flower from the beginning. By boiling and drinking it, they could completely hide their appearance and voices for an hour. Even while invisible, Romatird admitted the method felt a little wrong, but it was probably their best option now. Luca still looked unconvinced. She stared at Myeongok carefully and admitted that the woman in front of her looked nothing like the Myeongok she remembered. Curious, Romatird asked what Myeongok used to be like 2 years ago. Luca quietly answered that Myeongok had once been passionate and clever. More importantly, she always carried the kingdom's treasure that had been bestowed upon her by the queen herself. The Holy Blade, a weapon capable of changing shape according to its master's will. Luca pointed out that Myeongok never went anywhere without it. Romatird then wondered where the Holy Blade was now. Luca immediately dismissed the idea that the older woman could possibly still have it, further convincing herself that they were chasing the wrong person. At that moment, another problem quietly unfolded inside the store. One of the customers noticed how sleepy and distracted Myeongok looked and smirked to himself. Thinking the rumors about the town being full of easy targets were true, he secretly began stealing items from the shelves. He looked at Myeongok and assumed she was too harmless to notice anything. Confident he would not get caught, the thief quickly prepared to leave before she woke up properly. However, just as he was about to escape, Myeongok suddenly stood up and casually remarked that there was always something needing to be cleaned. The thief froze in panic. A second ago, she had clearly been resting behind the counter. Myeongok calmly looked at him and asked whether he was already leaving. The thief desperately wondered if she had somehow noticed the stolen items. Nearby, Luca had already lost patience and wanted to leave, convinced this entire situation was pointless. But Romatird suddenly stopped and pointed out that something interesting was happening. Myeongok slowly glanced toward the thief and calmly said she did not remember ringing up the items he was carrying. The thief instantly panicked and ran. In the very next moment, Myeongok moved. Using the broom in her hand, she effortlessly took him down in a single strike. Luca's eyes widened in shock. Myeongok then scolded the thief and asked if she really needed to teach him a lesson for stealing. At that moment, Luca finally noticed it. The broom itself was the Holy Blade. Luca instantly remembered teaching that exact attack to Myeongok long ago during their battles in the other world. Meanwhile, Myeongok casually warned the thief that he clearly had not heard the rumors about what happened to people who tried robbing her store before. Completely terrified, the thief fled while crying. As Myeongok calmly picked up the stolen items from the floor, Romatird looked incredibly excited and whispered happily that the weapon really was the Holy Blade. Romatird even admired how cool Myeongok still looked when angry. Luca immediately told Romatird to wait. Romatird, now completely convinced, asked why Luca was still being stubborn even after seeing undeniable proof. According to Romatird, Luca seriously needed to start listening to other people for once. Instead of arguing back, Luca silently pointed downward. Romatird's feet had become visible. The effects of the ghost flower were ending. Realizing they were about to reappear, Luca and Romatird quickly started leaving the store. However, before stepping outside, Luca glanced back one final time at Myeongak. Now, there was no doubt left. That woman truly was Myeongak. Only the real Myeongak could possess the holy blade. A moment later, the store door opened and the bell rang. Hearing it, Myeongak looked up toward the entrance, only to find nobody there. Far away in the other world, inside the royal palace, someone reported important news to the queen. The queen listened quietly after receiving the report that the fabled warrior had finally been found. She praised Luca and Romatird for their work and ordered them to return as soon as possible. Luca, who was speaking to the queen through a magical communication device, hesitated for a moment before saying there was something else she needed to report. The queen told her to continue. Luca explained that Myeongak had changed far more than expected since they last saw her. The queen recalled Luca mentioning earlier that Myeongak had aged, and one of the royal subordinates added that the most likely explanation was the time difference between the two worlds. Luca continued by explaining that not only had Myeongak's appearance changed, but she also completely rejected them and refused to even speak properly. She now had a family in this world, and Luca worried that forcing her to return would put her in a difficult position. However, the queen coldly replied that none of that mattered. Luca tried to speak again, but the queen immediately interrupted her and repeated herself more firmly. It did not matter what Myeongak wanted or what situation she was in. Their mission was to bring her back immediately. The queen then asked Luca whether there was anything more important than the safety of the kingdom. She reminded Luca of the horrors they experienced during the previous war against the Demon King and asked if she truly wanted to witness that nightmare again. Luca quietly answered that she did not. The queen then warned her not to forget the mission or the responsibility entrusted to her. Finally, she ordered Luca not to disappoint her mother. Meanwhile in Korea, Manhwa was taking out the garbage with her friends, but unlike usual, she barely paid attention to their conversation. Her mind remained focused on the strange events from the other day. Those people looked exactly like characters straight out of a fantasy comic, and somehow they knew her mother personally. Ever since meeting them, her mother had also been acting strangely and avoiding questions whenever Minha tried asking about them. Even so, Minha eventually convinced herself she was probably overthinking things. If her mother said she did not know them, then maybe that was really the truth. There was no reason to keep thinking about those weird perverts anymore. Right after thinking that, she suddenly bumped directly into Romatird. Startled, Minha instantly grabbed a nearby trash bin like a weapon and shouted at the elf for somehow finding her school. She even accused Romatird of being a stalker. Romatird calmly handed over the bag Minha had dropped during the incident earlier. Minha quickly snatched it back and checked inside to make sure nothing was missing. After confirming everything was there, Romatird apologized for what happened before and explained that they genuinely believed Minha was Myeongak at first. The elf then admitted there was something important they wanted to discuss with her. Confused, Minha asked why they kept trying so hard to talk to her specifically. Romatird explained that they would soon need to return to their world, so they did not have much time left. Everything they were doing was for Myeongak. When Minha asked what exactly they wanted from her, Romatird finally explained the truth. According to the elf, her mother was once a legendary warrior who saved their kingdom in the past. Now, they needed her help again to stop the demon lord from resurrecting. However, since Myeongak refused to meet them, they hoped Minha could help them talk to her instead. After hearing the entire explanation, Minha stared silently for a second. Then she simply called it a complete waste of time and tried walking away. Romatird quickly followed after her while insisting everything was true. At that moment, Luca suddenly appeared and bluntly admitted she never expected Minha to believe them so easily anyway. Minha angrily asked how anyone could possibly believe such a ridiculous story. She reminded them she was still a normal student, not an idiot, and demanded they stop talking nonsense and get out of her way. Romatird continued insisting that everything was true. Frustrated, Minha challenged them to prove it by showing her actual magic. The elf looked around nervously and asked if she really wanted them to do it there in public. Minha immediately shouted for them to show her right now. Luca then decided there was probably no harm in revealing a little. Since too many people were nearby, Romatird suggested moving somewhere else first. Suddenly, a magical staff appeared in the elf's hand. Minha's eyes widened in shock. Before she could even react properly, vines from the staff wrapped around her waist. Panicking, Minha shouted at Romatird and asked if the elf had seriously just grabbed her with a tree. Romatird apologized awkwardly. Then, in the next moment, Minha was suddenly launched high into the air toward the rooftop of the school. After landing on the roof safely, she sat there completely stunned while trying to process what had just happened. Luca calmly stated that nobody would bother them there. Meanwhile, Minha could barely think straight anymore. She had no idea what just happened, but one thing was certain. It was unbelievably cool. Nearby, Luca quietly remembered the queen's warning not to disappoint her mother. Pushing aside her hesitation, she reminded herself that the mission came first, no matter what. She then walked toward Minha and told her to calm down now that she finally understood the situation. According to Luca, it would be easier for everyone if Minha simply stopped resisting and willingly helped them from now on. Elsewhere, Myeongak suddenly rushed toward the school after receiving a strange message from Minha telling her to come immediately and come alone. Ever since receiving the call, she had been unable to contact her daughter again. Without hesitation, she jumped over the school gate and ran inside while desperately calling out for Minha. Then she looked upward toward the rooftop and spotted 3 figures standing there. Minha was one of them. The moment Myeongak recognized Luca and Romitird beside her daughter, panic immediately filled her mind. She feared they might have given up on taking her and decided to target Minha instead. Refusing to let that happen, she rushed toward the rooftop entrance and threw the door open. The moment Myeongak opened the rooftop door, she froze in confusion. Instead of seeing her daughter in danger, she saw something completely unexpected. Romitird was tearing up while saying for Minha to stop already, but Minha refused to listen and declared that the game was not over yet because she still had 2 more hits left. Only then did she notice her mother standing near the entrance. Minha immediately complained about how late her mother was and said they had been waiting forever. Completely confused, Myeongak asked what exactly was going on there. Minha casually explained that Luca and Romitird asked her to arrange a meeting, so she called her mother to the school herself. After listening to their story, it really seemed like they genuinely knew her. Then Minha crossed her arms angrily and complained that her mother never told her such an amazing story about being a warrior in another world when she was younger. According to Minha, keeping such cool adventures a secret from her own daughter was incredibly unfair. Hearing all that, Myeongak immediately dropped to her knees in exhaustion and thought that her daughter was seriously going to give her a heart attack someday. Luca explained that she needed Myeongak to return with her and meet the queen. While waiting for Myeongak earlier, Luca also realized that Minha somehow had an even stronger personality than her mother. Myeongak immediately denied knowing what Luca was talking about and tried looking away, but Luca calmly continued and said there was no point pretending anymore because she already knew the broom was actually the holy blade. That single sentence made Myeongak look even more exhausted than before. Minha interrupted excitedly and complained that her mother should have simply told the truth from the beginning instead of hiding everything. Then, with sparkling eyes full of excitement, Minha even asked if her mother could take her along to the other world as a bonus companion. Myeongak instantly realized where the conversation was heading and immediately shut it down. She grabbed Minha and declared they had absolutely no reason to go anywhere, especially not another world. According to her, the conversation was over and they were going home immediately, but Luca refused to back down. She calmly stated that she understood what Myeongak feared. Luca promised they were not asking for help for free and said the kingdom could reward her with wealth, power, treasure, or anything else she desired. Luca even promised that Myeongak and her children would live comfortably for the rest of their lives if she agreed to help. Romitird also begged sincerely for her to come back with them. However, Myeongak coldly rejected them both. She admitted that Luca was right about one thing: she truly was afraid. But no matter what happened in their world, it no longer had anything to do with her. Myeongak firmly declared that she already had her own life in this world now. She had worked hard to build a peaceful life for herself and her family, so they needed to solve their own problems without involving her. The moment those words left her mouth, Luca quietly pulled out her sword and pointed it toward Myeongak from behind. Myeongak slowly turned around and asked whether Luca had seriously just drawn a sword on her. Luca admitted she did not want things to end this way either, but she could not disappoint the queen. Failure was simply not acceptable. So Luca proposed a duel instead. If Myeongak won, Luca promised to back down. But if Luca won, Myeongak would have to return with them. Myeongak stared at her in disbelief and asked if she had completely lost her mind. Luca simply ordered her to draw her sword. Even if Luca had to force her by violence, she would complete the queen's orders no matter what. At that moment, Myeongak finally realized something. Luca's stubborn personality had not changed even slightly after all these years. With a tired sigh, Myeonguk transformed the magical broom into a sword and ordered Minha to stay back. Seeing the holy blade again made Luca smile slightly because, for the first time since arriving in Korea, Myeonguk finally resembled the warrior Luca remembered. Without hesitation, Luca rushed forward. Myeonguk blocked the attack immediately, but her eyes widened in surprise at Luca's speed. The pressure from the battle instantly reminded her that Luca had never stopped fighting during those missing years. Meanwhile, Myeonguk herself had spent decades living peacefully. Frustrated, Myeonguk shouted that Luca was not listening to anything she said. She already told them their world had nothing to do with her anymore. Luca immediately argued back that Myeonguk was the one refusing to listen. Myeonguk countered by pointing out that Luca was the one who suddenly appeared out of nowhere and tried forcing her back into another world. During the intense exchange of blows, Luca suddenly asked whether Myeonguk was scared because she could no longer fight like she used to. Luca claimed that not only had Myeonguk's body aged, but even her heart had rusted over time. The words hit deeply. Myeonguk immediately tried attacking out of anger, but Luca effortlessly dodged the strike. In the very next instant, Myeonguk's sword was knocked out of her hands. The duel was over. Luca calmly pointed her blade toward Myeonguk and remarked that she was still easy to provoke emotionally. Then she told Myeonguk to give up already, because continuing the fight would only lead to unnecessary injuries. Afterward, Luca pulled out a piece of the stone of confinement. Myeonguk instantly recognized it. Luca explained that they used the stone's power to travel to Korea in the first place. Then she activated it and opened a portal leading back to the other world. Watching the massive portal appear behind Luca, Minha finally panicked and shouted that this was not what they agreed on at all. Meanwhile, Myeonguk stared silently at the portal. Ever since returning to Korea all those years ago, she struggled endlessly to build her peaceful life. She worked hard to create a stable family and finally escaped the painful memories of the other world. And now, after everything she sacrificed, they expected her to throw all of that away and return again simply because they needed her. Luca quietly promised that she would repay this debt someday and told Myeonguk not to worry. Then Luca grabbed Myeonguk's hand. A bright flash instantly covered everything. In the next moment, all of them were transported into another world. Minha stared around in complete amazement at the breathtaking scenery surrounding them. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept past them, and both Minha and Myeonguk slowly looked toward the unfamiliar landscape ahead. They had truly arrived in another world. The moment they arrived in the other world, Minha could hardly believe what she was seeing. Looking around at the unfamiliar landscape, she excitedly asked if they were really in another world. Meanwhile, Myeonguk suddenly lost consciousness. As darkness filled her vision, an old memory resurfaced from 31 years ago. Back then, it was the day she was preparing to return home after defeating the Demon King. Rome-Teared stood nearby, crying uncontrollably, while Luca repeatedly told Romy to stop, because it was only making things harder for Myeonguk to leave. Rome apologized, but another companion named Cameo immediately pointed out that Luca had been crying all day long. Embarrassed, Luca quickly covered this companion's mouth. Seeing them act like that made Myeonguk smile through her own tears. A lot had happened during the 6 months she spent in that world. Even though it was only a short part of her life, she knew she would never forget it. At the beginning, they constantly argued and struggled to get along. But as they traveled together, they slowly became true friends. Thinking that she would never see them again made her cry even harder. She admitted that they were the only real friends she had, and wondered how she would handle missing them so much. The three companions stepped closer and assured her that they would miss her too. Luca encouraged her by saying that she would do fine after returning home and would surely make many new friends. Cameo agreed and promised to continue researching ways to connect the two worlds. Myeonguk wiped away her tears and jokingly told them they would see if that ever happened. If they somehow managed to meet again one day, they would make sure to celebrate it properly. The memory faded as Myeonguk slowly opened her eyes. Confused, she looked around the unfamiliar room and wondered where she was. Just then, someone entered. Her eyes widened. It was Cameo, and Myeonguk immediately recognized her old companion. She could hardly believe how much Cameo had changed. Compared to the companion she remembered from the past, Cameo now looked far more mature and refined. Cameo laughed and reminded her that 2 years had passed in their world. Myeonguk quickly asked where she was and what had happened. Cameo explained that a strange flash of light appeared near a cliff, so Cameo rushed there on horseback. By the time Cameo arrived, she was already unconscious. Since traveling such a long distance must have exhausted her, they brought her to a nearby village to rest. While listening, Myeonggok felt her heart sink. She was really back in the other world. Kamio admitted that Myeonggok often came to mind after she disappeared, and that seeing her again was completely unexpected. Kamio also explained that despite years of research, the reason behind the time difference between the two worlds still remained a mystery. However, Kamio promised to continue investigating. Myeonggok immediately brushed the topic aside. Instead, she asked where Minha was. As she moved, a sharp pain shot through her hand. Looking down at the injury she received during her fight with Luca, she clenched her teeth in frustration. She was definitely not forgiving Luca anytime soon. Kamio informed her that Minha was currently exploring the village with Luca and Rome, while they waited for someone from the palace to arrive. Hearing that immediately put Myeonggok on edge. The palace already knew she was here. After Kamio left to fetch medicine from the innkeeper, Myeonggok sat up and began thinking seriously about her situation. If the palace got involved, escaping would become much harder. She needed to find Minha, recover the pendant, and return to Korea before things became even more complicated. That was when she noticed her sword resting nearby. Elsewhere, Minha was having the time of her life. Everything around her felt completely different from Korea. The buildings, the clothes, and even the people looked like they had stepped right out of a fantasy novel. However, she also noticed that many villagers were staring at them strangely. Romachird explained that outsiders rarely visited the village anymore. Before the Demon Lord's attack, it had been a thriving place, but much of the population left after the destruction caused by the war. Curious, Minha asked if the Demon Lord had really been that powerful. Romachird became serious and explained that the Demon Lord was far more than simply strong. It was a terrifying existence that nearly destroyed half the kingdom. Hearing that, Minha looked shocked. Her mother had actually fought something like that. No matter how hard she tried, she could not imagine the woman who ran a convenience store battling such a monster. Excited, she asked for more details about what happened back then. Romachird smiled and called over Luca. Unfortunately, ever since the duel, Luca had been buried in self-pity. She quietly muttered that she was terrible for threatening Myeonggok with a sword and forcing her back to another world. She was convinced Myeonggok hated her now. Romachird tried reassuring her that Myeonggok probably did not hate her. Although dragging someone into another world after they repeatedly said no was admittedly a little extreme. Luca immediately corrected Romachird. She was not trash, she was toxic waste. Before the conversation could continue, a ball suddenly smacked directly into Minha. Instantly annoyed, she turned toward the children responsible. The kids panicked and ran away, causing Minha to chase after them. Unfortunately for her, one of the children was a beastman. After running for a while, Minha finally lost track of them. Breathing heavily, she admitted that the bunny was ridiculously fast. Then she looked around and realized she had absolutely no idea where she was. While trying to figure out her location, she overheard a nearby conversation. Curious, she quietly moved closer and spotted a beastman talking with a hooded figure. The beastman seemed angry and complained about people from the palace doing something terrible. After listening for a moment, the hooded figure calmly replied that they understood. Suddenly, the child from earlier ran over crying and called his father. The father immediately picked up his son and announced that he needed to leave. Once they were gone, the hooded figure turned toward Minha. The figure quickly walked over and stared at her strange clothes. Minha awkwardly introduced herself as just a student passing by. Without warning, the hooded figure grabbed her wrist. Startled, Minha demanded to know what they were doing and told them to let go. The hooded figure looked directly at her and quietly asked a question. "You are not from here, are you?" Back at the inn, Kamio returned to Myeonggok's room carrying some ointment. Kamio explained that there happened to be a pharmacy near the counter, but the moment Kamio entered the room, it was empty. The window was wide open. Myeonggok had already escaped. Meanwhile, Myeonggok moved through the village while thinking that she had gotten away just in time. If she had tried leaving through the front entrance, she probably would have been caught immediately. Thankfully, the holy blade could transform into whatever she needed, and this time, it had become a rope that allowed her to climb down safely. Now hidden among the villagers, she focused on her next objective, find Minha and return home. Elsewhere, Minha was still dealing with the strange person she had encountered. After being asked if she was from another world, she casually replied that she was simply on vacation from another world. The mysterious man immediately released her hand and seemed surprised that anyone would casually allow her to wander around. He then asked whether she came from Meaded Westford. Before Minha could answer, another mysterious stranger walked over and asked what was happening. After seeing the situation, The stranger joked about finding a suspicious little girl. The mysterious man immediately complained that the stranger had finally decided to show up after wandering around somewhere. In response, the stranger shot back that he was the one wasting time chatting with a girl. The stranger then looked carefully at Minha and shrugged. She did not look suspicious at all. The stranger quietly reminded the mysterious man that they had more important matters to handle. Leaning closer, the stranger whispered that the people they were looking for were currently in the village. Minha watched the entire exchange with growing confusion. Afterward, the stranger politely apologized for startling her and explained that the mysterious man had a somewhat sensitive personality. Before leaving, the stranger even offered to buy her a meal if they happened to meet again someday. With that, the two disappeared. Minha could only stare after them while wondering what kind of people they were. A few moments later, Romatird finally arrived after searching everywhere for her. Relieved, Romatird explained that everyone had been looking all over the village. Minha apologized and immediately began talking about the strange people she had just met. However, before she could explain properly, she noticed several unfamiliar people standing behind Romatird and Luca. Meanwhile, Myeonggok continued searching through the village while repeatedly calling out for her daughter. After wandering around for hours, she eventually sat down on a bench and tried to calm herself. Too much time had already passed since they arrived in this world. If she waited much longer, things would only become more complicated. Just then, someone approached her. It was an elf woman carrying a bottle of water. The woman kindly offered it to Myeonggok and sat down beside her with her young daughter. After hearing that Myeonggok was looking for her own daughter, the woman promised to tell her immediately if she saw anyone matching the description. Grateful, Myeonggok thanked her. The elf woman's daughter curiously asked who Myeonggok was, causing the woman to smile. Looking at the child reminded Myeonggok of when Minha was younger. The elf woman laughed and commented that children could certainly cause plenty of trouble. Myeonggok immediately agreed. According to her, children were adorable when they were young, but once they got older, they became stubborn, argued about everything, and constantly yelled at their parents. Myeonggok laughed and eventually stood up to continue her search. Before leaving, she thanked the woman once more. The elf woman modestly claimed she had done nothing special, but Myeonggok admitted that simply talking with someone from this world again had helped more than expected. Suddenly, loud shouting erupted nearby. A crowd began gathering in the village square. One villager announced that royal knights had arrived in the village. Another immediately asked why the royal knights would come to such a remote place. Nobody seemed to know the answer. Then someone mentioned that the knights had brought a strange girl wearing unusual clothes and were searching for a woman. The moment Myeonggok heard that description, she knew exactly who they were talking about. Quickly asking where the knights were, she headed toward the crowd. Elsewhere, Minha had just learned that Myeonggok had disappeared from the inn. Romatird explained that Myeonggok must have slipped away while Cameo was distracted. Since she was probably somewhere inside the village, the knights had started searching everywhere. Minha immediately pointed out that her mother would not be easy to catch. Luca silently agreed. Myeonggok was far too experienced to get caught so easily. Cameo suggested that Myeonggok was most likely searching for Minha. If that was true, she was probably still somewhere in the village. Since Myeonggok wanted the pendant, they should be able to find her eventually. Luca ordered the guards to search every part of the village. As the search began, Luca remembered the harsh words spoken during the duel. Regret filled her mind. She knew she had already hurt Myeonggok and desperately wanted a chance to make things right. Then suddenly, terrified screams echoed from the edge of the village. Everyone turned toward the source of the commotion. A frightened beastman pointed toward the forest with a trembling hand. Meanwhile, Myeonggok was also horrified. The elf woman and her daughter looked equally terrified. One of the soldiers demanded that the beastman explain clearly what was happening. The beastman finally managed to speak. There is a monster in the forest. It's eating people. The moment those words left the beastman's mouth, something emerged from the shadows. Everyone froze. Luca, Romatird, and Myeonggok immediately recognized the creature. It was a Garlu. Romatird quickly pulled Minha behind them and told her to stay back. Staring at the monster, Minha nervously asked what it was. Around them, the soldiers prepared their weapons. Luca's expression darkened. The appearance of monsters this close to the village could only mean one thing. The demon lord's influence was already beginning to spread again. In the past, shortly after arriving in the other world, the young Myeonggok stared at a terrifying monster and trembled in fear. She had never seen anything like it before and desperately asked Luca to do something about it. Luca simply told her to stop making such a fuss because monsters like that would become her problem from now on. Hearing that, Myeonggok immediately panicked. How am I supposed to fight something like that? Can't you guys just defeat it yourselves? Rometeard quickly explained that it was not an ordinary monster. The creature was a cruel and ferocious beast that devoured anything in its path. Whenever the demon lord's power grew wild, these monsters were born. They were known as Garlu, servants of the demon lord and the foundation of its monstrous army. According to Rometeard, the Garlu had already destroyed cities throughout the kingdom and reproduced at an alarming rate. Entire regions had been wiped out by them, and if left unchecked, they would eventually spread across the entire continent. Worse still, the demon lord's influence made them stronger and harder to kill. Luca then explained the harsh reality. As long as the demon lord remained alive, the Garlu would continue appearing. That meant Myeongok would have to keep fighting monsters like these alongside them until their mission was complete. The young Myeongok could only stare at the monsters in horror. She was terrified. Back in the present, the situation had become just as desperate. The Garlu overwhelmed the village defenders one after another. Soldiers fell left and right while Luca fought desperately against one of the monsters. A Garlu suddenly leaped toward her, and Luca immediately drove her sword through it. However, the attack was not enough to stop the creature. Before she could react, the monster's tail whipped toward her. Rometeard instantly shouted a warning, but it was already too late. The tail struck Luca's leg and sliced through it. Ignoring the pain, Luca roared and forced herself forward, finally bringing the monster down. The moment the battle ended, she collapsed onto one knee. Rometeard rushed over and immediately began healing her injuries. Luca asked about the royal knights. Rometeard's expression darkened. Most of them were either dead or seriously wounded. At that moment, one of the surviving knights approached and reported that rescuing the villagers without reinforcements was impossible. Too much damage had already been done. The knights suggested retreating to the kingdom immediately. Minha immediately protested. Her mother was still somewhere in the village. What if something happened while she was alone? Rometeard calmly shook his head. If Myeongok was here, something like that would never happen. Minha stared at him in disbelief. According to her, her mother was weaker than all of them. How could Myeongok possibly handle monsters like these? Luca immediately answered. Because Myeongok was special, Minha could not believe what she was hearing and accused them of exaggerating her mother's abilities. Rometeard simply smiled. Myeongok was far stronger than Minha realized. Luca then explained the real reason they had come searching for her. Myeongok was the only person capable of weakening both the Demon Lord and the Garlu. Combined with the Holy Blade, her unique ability allowed her to fight enemies that nobody else could handle. While they were talking, another knight was suddenly attacked from behind. Before Luca could even warn them, a Garlu pounced and dragged the soldier down. More monsters surrounded the group. Soon, Luca, Rometeard, and Minha found themselves completely cornered. Luca looked around and realized there were far more monsters than before. She had no idea when they had been surrounded. Rometeard immediately cast a powerful spell. A magical barrier formed around them. Both of you, get closer. The barrier protected them temporarily, but Rometeard could already feel it weakening under the constant attacks. Meanwhile, Luca's condition continued getting worse. Rometeard warned her not to move because the poison from the Garlu's tail would spread faster. Luca bitterly pointed out that worrying about poison seemed pointless when the barrier was already beginning to crack. Rometeard admitted that he could not hold it much longer. Inside the barrier, Luca's vision slowly became blurry. She could barely feel her injured leg anymore. Whether it was from exhaustion or poison, she did not know. All she knew was that she could not afford to pass out now. Then suddenly, everyone noticed something. Someone was standing outside the barrier. It was Myeongok. Minha immediately shouted at her mother and begged her to run away because it was too dangerous. But the monsters had already surrounded Myeongok. Rometeard simply smiled. She'll be fine. Minha could not understand why everyone was so calm. Rometeard reminded her that he had already told her before. Myeongok was much stronger than she thought. Even Luca agreed. The reason Myeongok was special, and the reason they absolutely needed her, was because nobody else could do what she could. The next moment, Myeongok moved. One strike. The Garlu fell one after another before they could even react. Minha could only stare in disbelief. The monsters that had nearly wiped out the entire village could not even touch her mother. As the dust settled, every single Garlu around them had been eliminated. Not one remained standing. Myeongok calmly walked over toward the group. Luca thought Myeongok had come to help her. Instead, Myeongok grabbed Luca by the collar. Then she pulled the pendant away from her. After grabbing Minha, Myeongok prepared to leave immediately. Even when Luca tried to stop her, Myeonggok refused to listen. She told Luka to take a good look at herself. Luka could barely take care of her own body, yet she kept talking about repaying favors and protecting others. Myeonggok firmly declared that she was not indebted to them enough to risk her life fighting something as dangerous as the Demon Lord again. Hearing those words, Luka lowered her head. Deep down, she knew Myeonggok was right. She no longer had the right to stop her. But then, Luka remembered the queen, remembered her mother. Slowly, Luka looked up. She admitted that Myeonggok was correct. The current Luka was not strong enough to stop her. However, this incident had made one thing painfully clear. They desperately needed Myeonggok, no matter the cost. No matter what price they had to pay. Myeonggok listened to everything Luka said. Then she gave a simple answer: give up. Elsewhere, Kamio noticed a bright flash in the distance and immediately looked toward it. Meanwhile, Luka and Romityrd sat in disappointment after failing once again to convince Myeonggok. Unbeknownst to them, two familiar observers were watching from a nearby tree. After watching the entire scene unfold, the mysterious stranger laughed and commented that it had been quite a blow to those castle fools. Then the stranger glanced toward Myeonggok's departing figure. That woman was far more impressive than expected. After escaping through the portal, Myeonggok and Minha finally returned to Korea. The moment they arrived, Minha immediately complained that her mother could not just grab someone and drag them through a portal without warning. Myeonggok completely ignored the complaint and simply looked around in relief. They had made it back home. Only then did all the tension leave her body. Myeonggok collapsed onto the rooftop and sat down heavily. Worried, Minha quickly asked if she was all right. Myeonggok admitted that she was simply exhausted after finally relaxing. After everything that happened, she was just glad to be back. Telling Minha not to worry, she suggested they head home. Meanwhile, back in the other world, Luka and Kamio stood outside the queen's chamber. Just before knocking, Luka hesitated nervously. Romityrd noticed and quietly shook their head. From inside, the queen ordered them to enter. The moment they stepped inside, both Luka and Romityrd bowed respectfully. Luka greeted the queen and began reporting about the warrior, but the queen immediately interrupted her. There was no need, she already knew what happened. The queen simply asked whether they recovered the pendant. Luka confirmed that it had been left behind near the portal. Feeling guilty, Luka immediately apologized for her failure and begged the queen to punish her alone. To Luka's surprise, the queen calmly told her to lift her head. Rather than discussing punishment, the queen had another task. According to reports, something strange was happening in a village near the capital. She wanted Luka to investigate it personally. Although confused, Luka accepted the mission immediately. Normally, a simple assignment like this would have been given to an ordinary knight, so she could not understand why the queen specifically chose her. The queen then mentioned hearing about Luka's injured leg. Luka insisted it was nothing serious. The queen approached her and gently told her not to push herself too hard. She admitted that the mission must be exhausting and apologized for not giving Luka more time to rest. However, she also quietly reminded her not to make any mistakes this time. Luka smiled and promised she would not disappoint Her Majesty. Later, while traveling by carriage, Romityrd wondered why the queen had let them off so easily after failing such an important mission. Luka convinced herself that it probably meant the queen still trusted them. However, Kamio seemed far less comfortable. The road they were taking felt familiar. Before Kamio could finish the thought, the knight driving the carriage announced that they had arrived. The moment Luka stepped outside, a horrible smell hit her. The entire area smelled like a rotting graveyard. Kamio immediately recognized the place. Reports had already reached the capital about a plague spreading through this village. Most people had already abandoned it. While Kamio was explaining the situation, someone suddenly rushed toward Luka. The soldiers immediately surrounded the person with drawn weapons. It turned out to be an elderly woman. The woman recognized Luka's royal status and explained that she was the village chief. She had been waiting desperately for someone from the castle to arrive. Luka calmed the soldiers and asked what had happened. The village chief explained that about 2 months ago, the land surrounding the village began drying out. Crops stopped growing and harvests completely failed. Since the village depended on selling crops to the capital, everyone quickly fell into poverty. As if that was not enough, an epidemic soon spread through the village. People became sick one after another. Nearby villages refused to help them. Some villagers were even beaten whenever they tried leaving in search of food or medicine. Many residents had already died. The village chief explained that her own daughter and granddaughter had not eaten properly for days. If nothing changed soon, everyone remaining in the village would starve to death. Desperate, she begged Luka for help. Seeing the woman's tears, Luka promised that they would help. She swore they would not allow the villagers to suffer any longer. The village chief immediately broke down in tears of gratitude. Realizing how serious the situation was, Luca began organizing a rescue effort. She planned to evacuate the villagers and have Romatird treat the injured. Before she could finish giving instructions, a knight approached carrying a royal order. The knight explained that the command came directly from the queen. Luca immediately ordered the knight to read it aloud. The contents left everyone speechless. The order stated that the village could no longer provide resources to the capital due to the epidemic. There was also a high risk of the disease spreading further and threatening the kingdom. Therefore, for the safety of the majority, Luca was ordered to burn the entire village to the ground. Luca froze. Romatird immediately protested. There were still innocent people living there. Even if rebuilding the village would require time and money, they could not simply destroy it. Luca's face slowly darkened. This was not merely a suggestion. It was a direct order. Failure to obey would be considered treason. As those words echoed in her mind, Luca remembered a painful memory from her childhood. She remembered the queen teaching her a lesson and telling her to do something cruel with her own hands. The queen had assured her that people would thank her eventually. Now Luca finally understood. This mission was not about the village. This was punishment for failing to bring back Myeongok. Romatird desperately argued that they needed to inform the queen that people were still alive in the village. Kamio was equally horrified and admitted that if this was truly what they were expected to do, then perhaps they should simply leave. Luca immediately stopped Kamio. Ignoring the order would make all of them traitors. Kamio angrily asked whether Luca was really willing to label every innocent villager a traitor just to obey the queen. The question visibly shook her. One of the soldiers then added that the village had already gained a bad reputation and had been marked for removal for some time. All they needed now was Luca's command. Romatird tried speaking again. Luca immediately cut them off. Quietly but firmly, she reminded them that this was a direct royal order. Fulfilling it was their duty. If they could not do it, they should step aside. Just then, the village chief returned with several young villagers she had gathered to help with the rescue work. Before she could speak further, Luca shoved her aside. The elderly woman fell to the ground. The soldiers moved into position and prepared the fire. The village chief stared in horror. She begged them to stop. She begged Luca to reconsider. The soldiers pinned her to the ground while she screamed in despair. Then her fear turned into rage. She cursed Luca and swore that heaven would remember this day. According to her, everyone responsible would eventually be punished in the deepest pits of hell. Finally, she shouted a name: Queen Artile Guinevere Vizenta. Meanwhile, back at the palace, one of the queen's attendants expressed sympathy regarding the failed mission involving the warrior. The queen calmly dismissed it. According to her, the failure was the result of having raised a weak daughter. She admitted she had been too lenient with Luca for far too long. However, by now, Luca was probably learning her lesson. The queen wanted her daughter to understand exactly where she belonged. She did not belong to herself. Far away, the village burned. As flames consumed everything around her, Luca stood silently before the destruction while her mother's words echoed inside her mind. Back in the palace, the queen calmly gave another order. As soon as Luca returned, preparations should begin immediately. Luca would be sent back to the warrior's world once again. Back in Korea, Minha struggled to keep up as Myeongok hurried home at an incredible pace. She shouted for her mother to slow down, but Myeongok barely seemed to hear her. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the key and unlocked the door. The moment she stepped inside, she immediately called out for Minhyu. Minhyu was casually sitting in front of the television when his mother suddenly rushed over to him. Confused, he asked where she had been. Instead of answering, Myeongok grabbed his cheeks and anxiously checked him over. She asked if he was all right and worriedly claimed he looked thinner than before. Minha stared at her mother strangely. "Mom, why are you acting like this? It's not like you haven't seen him in years." Then she noticed an empty pizza box nearby and immediately changed the subject. Shocked, she accused Minhyu of ordering an entire pizza and eating it all by himself. Myeongok quickly joined in, worrying that there was probably no food left in the house and that Minhyu must have been starving while they were gone. At that point, Minhyu looked completely lost. He asked whether something strange happened 2 days ago. Myeongok froze. 2 days ago. Minhyu casually explained that Myeongok disappeared 2 nights earlier and only returned now. Since Minha was missing too, he assumed they had gone to visit their aunt. Apparently, their aunt had even called to say she had safely returned to Korea. Minhya immediately complained that he was being way too calm about the fact that they had disappeared. Before Minhyu could defend himself, Myeongok interrupted. No way. For a moment, she could not believe what she was hearing. From her perspective, much more time had passed. Then she remembered the conversations about the flow of time between worlds. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. This was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Without warning, she hugged Minhyu tightly. The confused boy could only ask whether his mother was feeling all right. Neither Minhyu nor Minha understood what was going on. Later that night, Myeonggok lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She felt relieved beyond words. They had returned safely. Both of her children were safe. Nothing else mattered. However, one question continued bothering her. Why had only 2 days passed? She could not use magic like Luca or Romatird. All she did was grab the pendant, and before she knew it, she was standing back on the school rooftop in Korea. Had she misunderstood how the pendant worked this entire time? Eventually, Myeonggok forced herself to stop thinking about it. Everything worked out in the end. That was enough. If they had stayed in the other world any longer, who knew what might have happened? She had separated herself from their problems. She was no longer responsible for whatever happened over there. She had already done her part. It had nothing to do with her anymore. She repeatedly told herself not to think about it, not to remember, not to care. But no matter how hard she tried, images of the other world kept appearing in her mind. Just then, someone knocked on her door. It was Minha. Myeonggok asked what she wanted. Minha sat beside her on the bed and admitted that she felt strange. Everything that happened recently felt so unbelievable that she was not even sure it was real anymore. Myeonggok understood exactly how she felt. However, she immediately warned Minha not to tell anyone about what happened. Minha promised she would keep it secret. Then she leaned forward excitedly. She wanted to know more. She wanted to hear about Myeonggok's life in the other world. The stories, the adventures, the people, the places, the talking animals, the little beastman child who threw a ball at her and ran away. Everything. Most importantly, she wanted to know how Myeonggok met Luca, Romatird, and Cameo in the first place. They seemed incredibly close. Then Minha suddenly asked the most important question of all. Was the demon lord handsome? She even asked if she could touch the holy blade. That was the final straw. Stop! Minha jumped in surprise. Myeonggok sat up and told her she got a headache just thinking about those things. She begged her daughter to stop asking questions and let her rest. Realizing she had gone too far, Minha apologized and quietly left the room. Outside, Minhyu immediately asked where she and their mother had gone. Minha instantly snapped back that it was none of his business. Now it was Minhyu's turn to be confused. Why was she getting angry at him? Back in her room, Minha lay on her bed feeling slightly guilty. Maybe she should not have brought it up. Myeonggok clearly was not in a good mood. Perhaps she should have waited and asked later. Still, Minha felt frustrated too. She had been dragged into another world without any explanation. The least her mother could do was tell her what was going on. While thinking about it, she remembered a scene from her favorite comic and opened it. Inside, the heroine who had been transported to another world was fighting monsters alongside the prince. Looking at the scene, Minha could not help smiling. For once, she actually understood exactly how the character felt. The monsters were terrifying. But somehow, it had not all been bad. Meanwhile, somewhere else in Korea, a shopkeeper was trying to explain souvenirs to a customer. The customer happened to be Romatird. The shopkeeper pointed at a shirt and explained that "I love Korea" meant the person loved the country. Nearby, Cameo looked around with endless curiosity. This was Cameo's first time visiting Korea. Everything seemed fascinating. Cameo pointed toward a subway entrance and wondered whether it was the entrance to some underground dungeon. Watching crowds of tired office workers emerge from it only strengthened the theory. Then Cameo pointed at one of the dancing inflatable advertising balloons outside a store and asked what kind of creature it was. Moments later, Cameo looked up at an airplane flying across the sky and wondered if it was some sort of mechanical dragon. The more Cameo explored, the more excited the companion became. This world was unbelievably interesting. Cameo had never seen a place like it before.